Hi everyone, thanks for being on today's webinar. We're going to allow a couple more minutes here for others to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started in just a few minutes. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Where Are You in Your DevOps Adoption, presented by Tim Reaves, Eliassen Group's Technical Practices and Delivery Lead. Today's webinar will explore how to more precisely deliver DevOps by referencing key metrics and strategies which will help you better determine what you're doing right and identify opportunities for growth. Just some housekeeping before we begin. Please make sure that your phones are all muted if they aren't already. Also, feel free to address any questions you have in the comment box, and we'll take some time at the end of the webinar to answer those questions. We know how valuable your time is today, so we're going to go ahead and try to wrap this up right around 11:45. We will take a couple of questions, and then anything we don't get to, we will follow up with you following the webinar. Tim, I'll pass it over to you. I hope everybody enjoys.
Thank you, Lexi. We can go ahead and move to the next slide, please. And for the folks on the phone, unfortunately I had a bit of a technical issue with the slide deck, so Lexi will be helping me, so please forgive the comments asking her to change slides. As Lexi said, I am Eliassen Group's technical practices and delivery consultant. That is opposed to agile process folks. We have a lot of coaches that are specifically in the process space, whether that be Scrum, Kanban, or others. I tend to do anything that is more hands-on, so technical practices, of which DevOps is one practice. I have about 25 years overall experience in software delivery. For about the past 15 years, DevOps has been not the central focus, but it has been integral to everything I have done. I have a good deal of experience with DevOps, and as it happens, I've helped contribute to several of the tools in the DevOps space, which is one of the reasons why at Eliassen they just simply call me the DevOps guy. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, before you switch slides, my email address is shown on this slide. If at the end of the presentation you have any comments, you think I've missed anything, you'd like anything added, or just simply want to discuss it more, please do feel free to email me at that address. And the next slide. Here are some overall statistics on Eliassen Group for those who may not be familiar. I'm not going to go over it in great detail. I assume that most of you know who we are. You wouldn't have received the invites. But we do have a rather large group of contracting consultants to help with things from the agile practices, as I mentioned earlier, to more in-depth technical practices. Next slide, please. Here is an overview of some of Eliassen Group's offerings. They tend to fall into these 6 categories of introduction to Agile, team coaching facilitation, DevOps, Agile disciplines, executive type work, technical practices. And you can see listed around there some of the subcategories of those genres. Next slide, please. So today, this is what I'm going to be talking about. We're going to start off with a brief overview of what at Eliassen constitutes a maturity matrix, and then I'm going to specifically talk about how that applies to DevOps and DevOps adoption. Next slide, please. Some of you may have seen an Agile maturity matrix that Eliassen's coaches use when we are engaging with a client. And what it has been historically is a spreadsheet with, I can't remember the exact number, there's close to 40 metrics that are measured on a scale of 0 to 4. And the different practices within Scrum or Kanban or whatever. And this is a tool that is primarily focused at the team level. And a coach would fill this out on a monthly basis to help an organization understand what their Agile adoption was looking like, give them areas they could focus on, give them some goals. That's all right. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. An example of that would be, as a metric, would be being agile, which is the very first metric you encounter on this maturity matrix. And as I stated, you would typically grade this on a scale of 0 to 4, unless you're not a C programmer, and that might be 1 to 5. But this is how we would define that. We would define a level 0 as being impeded, which for being agile means there's no understanding of the agile spirit. And then level 1, doing the metrics, doing the mechanics. Level 2, which we would consider sustainable, would be 80% of the teams can explain the benefits of being agile, believe in the benefits of agile, so forth. If you're an agile organization at being agile, you would be working in an agile manner. And then level 4, which is an ideal, would be actively pursuing new ways of working in an agile manner. What I've done in my spare time is I've tried to move this out of a spreadsheet and into an actual application, and it's called EMMA, the Eliassen Maturity Matrix application. And here you can see some sample screenshots of at least the radar chart out of this tool. And what this does is it basically just takes what had been a spreadsheet and turns it into a deployed application where coaches or anyone who's interested can go in and be led through doing an evaluation of a team or an organization. And in these 3 screenshots, what I'm trying to convey, and this was being used internally to show some folks, is in this first screenshot, you have there a team that has decided that there are very specific metrics within the Agile, there we go. Very specific metrics within the Agile maturity metrics that they're interested in. They're not interested in all of them, which is why in that lighter blue color you don't see some of the things they're focusing on. And then that middle one is showing one where they are interested in all the metrics and how they're doing in the various metrics. And the third would show you a trending graph. And I understand that that's small and you can't see it, or you can't see it very well. But the intention is to give teams or give organizations the ability to measure their progress over time. And that would be showing you your overall goals, your most recent assessment, your first assessment, and then an average of that assessment to give you a visual idea of the areas you need to work on. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. With the DevOps, I was asked to come up with a DevOps maturity matrix. And I've done so. I think right now there are about a dozen metrics that are being measured. I'm greatly interested in hearing from anyone on this webinar metrics that you think I've overlooked or am not treating in an in-depth enough manner. I was having a conversation with a coworker where we thought that if we wanted to be very specific, there really could be 20 or 30 individual metrics that were being measured. As an initial rollout, I wanted to keep it relatively small to make it manageable. One of the things I don't want is people spending time figuring out, well, is this practice part of this metric or is it part of this other metric? So I tried to keep them few and far between. And actually, if you're using the Emma application, you literally can only choose 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. You can't, for example, choose 3.5. If you're not sure if a metric should be measured at 3 or 4, it should be measured at 3. So the first metric around measuring a DevOps rollout at an organization or DevOps adoption, and these aren't in any particular order, by the way. They're just the order that I enumerated them for this talk. But the first one, and which is perhaps arguably the most important, is there a build server? And is it up and running? Do teams know that it's there? Do they know why it's there? That's kind of the description of what this particular metric is measuring and what you would see through some of the various levels. Now, when it comes to DevOps, a lot of people tend to focus on the development side of it. It's easiest to do, and it's perhaps the most obvious place to start. For example, with a build server is obviously geared towards a delivery team. I do take into account the varied facets of DevOps, and you'll see that reflected in the metrics as we finish going through the slide deck. So if you think I've overlooked something, by all means note it, but keep that in mind as we finish going through here. So with a build server, level 0 would be there are no build servers. Level 1 is a team has set one up on one of their own desktops or laptops for them to use. Going up through, several teams have localized build servers to an organization has decided that they're adopting this, and they provide a build farm with centrally managed jobs all the way up through teams having control. For this particular metric, for that level 4, teams having control I think is crucial. One of the things that teams need to be successful is they need to be in control of those resources they need to deliver software. And it's common in an organization when they rolled out an organization build farm to think that it needs to be centrally managed and administrated. For example, one of these things you'll hear is, oh, we don't want a developer inadvertently logging in and messing something up. And obviously you don't want anyone messing anything up, whether that be a developer or a systems administrator. But at the end of the day, the teams have to have the ability to go and create the jobs they need to get things done. So a higher level of proficiency is going to be achieved when that's possible. Obviously, you would want practices in place to ensure that if something were done incorrectly, that you can recover from that. Most of the modern build servers have build pipelines as code anymore, so it's rather easy to recover from that. Next slide, please. Automated deployments. So we have a build server, and we're doing builds, but are we automating deployments? And if so, what kind of automated deployments are happening? There again, level 0 is no understanding of an automated deployment. And what I mean there is I've encountered organizations where they don't believe that it's possible to do an automated deployment. They do think that someone has to be involved to start the service, to install the service, whatever the case may be. Going up through, we understand that automated deployments are possible. We don't have any. To some teams are deploying their applications to servers, but not dependencies like data. This is a very common level for automated deployments. People will be using something like Jenkins to deploy to their development servers, where they then have to go in and execute a script to load data, to make database changes. So it's not an atomic operation, and an automated deployment really does need to be an atomic operation. So then we go up to level 3. Some teams are deploying both their application and the data at the same time. Through level 4, all teams have full stack automated deployments. Level 4 here is going to be very tricky for a lot of organizations to achieve. It's going to require, in some cases, a significant amount of thought and perhaps effort in making that possible. To do automated deployment, sometimes you also need to do things like automated environment provisioning. We'll be talking about that as another metric. But for automated deployments, you want to make sure that you have that scripted throughout the entire process of everything that's needed for this application to be running. Next slide, please. Automated testing. It's not uncommon to go into an organization and see that they are automating their builds, which most of the time will include at least some level of automation around unit testing, which would be for this particular metric a level 1, that you're running your build, and especially if you're using a tool like Maven where running your tests are part of running your build, you're doing that. What you have for a unit test suite, though, can tend to be very small. So for automated testing, we go up to level 2. We're talking about teams that have recognized that more than just automation of unit tests is needed. And unfortunately, anymore, the nomenclature around testing has become very muddied. I've been in organizations where they are calling full stack manual tests from login through purchase to logout a unit test. That's not what I mean by a unit test. So at level 2, we've progressed to an ATDD or a BDD type automated test. But this is testing still around the application itself. So at level 3, we're beginning to do some automated environment tests. And this is the type of test that many organizations aren't aware of, let alone do. And that is basically you should have a suite of automated tests that can assert that an environment is capable of running an application. So for example, if this is a Java application, is Java installed on the service or on the server you're deploying to? If it's a Windows server requiring a particular .NET framework, are those .NET frameworks pre-installed? Are database tools installed for connectivity? If you're using Oracle CLI or DB2 CLI, something of that nature. There should be some level of automation around testing that this server is capable of running, deploying your application. And then level 4 here extends that to are you doing any kind of automated security and performance tests? These things often get overlooked from testing, or they're handed off to other groups to do disjoint from the delivery process. And from a DevOps perspective, they shouldn't be. You really do want a suite of automated tests to measure your performance and to look for regressions in your performance, and then for security as well. And security is a large topic, and we'll talk a little bit about security itself as another metric, but this is specifically around automation of the tests related to security. Next slide, please. Environment provisioning. Are environments being provisioned automatically? More and more, this is becoming a crucial topic, and it's been made possible for a number of years now. You've been able to do things like spin up images regardless of whether it's VMware or now something like Docker. And at a level 0, you would have no understanding of environment provisioning. And you'll see that this is pretty repetitive as far as what levels 0 and 1 are, from no understanding to an understanding but no adoption. So going up through level 2, the deployment environments are provisioned, and there again, this is fairly common. Teams will have control of their development servers, and they can have some level of automation around deployments to there. And a lot of teams it stops, or excuse me, a lot of organizations it stops there. They'll go on to organize doing environment provisioning at a QA or a pre-prod or whatever the nomenclature of that organization is all handled manually. So at level 3, your test environments are being provisioned up through 4, where all your environments are automatically being provisioned. Next slide, please. And here we're looking now at integrations. What integrations exist to other systems? An initial adoption, you'll typically see a CI server. There are many different things, though, that you want for a DevOps adoption, other than just simply doing continuous integration. So you want things, for example, like artifact management. You want things like static code analysis. You want things like traceability with your requirements, all the way up to integration with monitoring systems. So that's what this metric is attempting to measure. Next slide, please. Is the overall pipeline audit controlled? This is becoming more and more of an issue, especially at organizations that historically have an awful lot of either internal or external compliance in place. One of the things I'm talking about with our clients is continual auditability, which is where your audit and compliance or your continual compliance are baked in. As a general statement, there's very little you can't automate if you choose to. And so that's what this metric is intended to measure. These CI servers have an awful lot of information that gets logged. We want the ability to manage and maintain that. So at level 1, the CI servers is managing that. Level 2, the tests and their output are added to the raw, audit record. This sometimes you'll see especially at medical device manufacturers, where they perceive an FDA requirement that any test that's run against software that's used in a medical device be traceable to the tests that were run and the output of it against any particular revision of their software. And then we go up to the next level, which is where your deployments are all audit controlled. And then finally, level 4, every aspect is being audited. You're seeing this in particular where Elasticsearch is being spun up and is kind of being used as your repository for audit records, and then each piece in your environment is recording its metrics to Elasticsearch, which gives you this really nice centralized, integrated, controlled environment for being able to see exactly what happened to any given piece of software and tracking what's in production. Next slide, please. Culture, and this perhaps is definitely one of the more important metrics to measure at an organization. And that's, do the groups in the end-to-end process operate from a perspective of shared accountability for the delivery of business results? One of the things that is first and foremost in my mind when it comes to delivery is the business value this is delivering. Most of the organizations that write software are doing so to deliver business value. And traditionally you'll see silos. You have the software development group, you'll have the database group, you'll have the security group, you'll have the infrastructure group, the security audit compliance group, and then the business group. And from a culture perspective, from a DevOps point of view, these need to be integrated. So at level 1, we have these separate teams exist to build, to test. Level 2, the delivery teams are responsible for their own quality and builds. This can be even a big hurdle at a lot of organizations where QA is not a separate process or a separate team. Up through level 3, where the delivery team understands the environments their applications will run in. So there again, if a team is delivering software to run production, it really is important that team understand what that production environment is like. Many organizations don't do this, and that can really lead to software being written that really is not optimized for the environment it's eventually going to be deployed to, especially in this world of free VMs everywhere. Up through level 4, an individual in the IT organization understands all the facets of the delivery. Rapid feedback is automatically available to that all the health systems, of the health of all the systems and the processes. So this is stating that any member on a delivery team understands what happens from requirements gathering, story writing, whatever nomenclature your organization uses, up to the point that that software will eventually become decommissioned. And they understand how their job impacts each part of that. Next slide, please. Server integrity. Do the servers from the development to production have the exact same configuration and version of the OS and other supporting software? There again, this is a huge one that most organizations don't do or don't even think is possible. It's fairly common for a lot of traditional organizations to have a dev, a QA, a pre-prod, and a prod tier. I've been in organizations that have had 12 tiers from a software developer deploying it to a server until that software gets deployed to production. And often these tiers are configured radically different from other tiers, whether that be in the resource allocation, i.e. memory and CPU cycles, to sometimes things like operating systems, even database systems. Oh, we'll use database A for development because it's free, and then database B in production because we want something that's highly performant. What we want to do ideally from a DevOps perspective is have these things be as similar as possible, and that's what this metric is measuring. So at level 1, multiple tiers are in place, and each tier may be configured differently from the production tier. Third-party dependencies are, however, the same. Level 2, each tier is configured identically, but still software, but they require software to be installed and or configured. Up through level 4, where level 4, you're basically deploying a VM, and that VM is migrated through the tiers, and that's a really progressive way of doing it, and there are organizations that do it that way. Instead of having a pre-prod tier, that image in a pre-prod label, if you will, is just simply access controlled and network controlled as it progresses through the various states. Next slide, please. Monitoring. Monitoring is another one that often gets overlooked. Monitoring is very important. Is monitoring in place that provides timely and accurate notification of issues? And the various levels here deal with the availability and existence of monitoring. And monitoring should be made available to the delivery teams. They should know if there's a problem in production. They should know if there's a problem in any one of the tiers. And that's also true of operations. This particular metric is probably most geared towards operations. They're the ones responsible for the day-to-day running and maintenance of an application. But you still want this monitoring to be available to all the people responsible for delivering an application so that they understand what's going on. And there again, know how what they do in their day-to-day jobs can impact a running system. So level 4 here is every system and process involved with delivery and execution are monitored with dashboards available to all. Most of the metrics out here, especially when we're talking about something like monitoring, there are a lot of great commercial and open source software out there to help teams accomplish this. Next slide, please. Continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is an interesting metric to measure and an interesting metric to talk about. There again, I'm in a lot of organizations who state, well, we can't do continuous delivery, where continuous delivery is defined as a developer committing code to a source code repository and having that change show up some deterministic amount of time later in production. And why I find this one a really interesting one to discuss with organizations is a lot of times I'll tell them whether they achieve continuous delivery or not is largely irrelevant from my perspective. what I'm wanting to help organizations understand is if continuous delivery is a goal, there again, I check in code, it shows up in production, what would that organization need to do to make that happen? You need to automate quality, you need to automate compliance, you need to automate security, you need to automate delivery, you need to automate everything along the way. And I point out that continuous delivery should be a business decision. It should not be a technical limitation. And when I talk about it being a business decision versus a technical limitation, it gives me the opportunity to have a conversation with that organization about these other things that are needed that would prevent that. And then at the end of the day, if those obstacles are overcome, whether or not they go with continuous delivery or not becomes their choice. So here we're measuring, up through kind of the standard CI and acceptance testings to builds are manually promoted on a monthly or greater timeline. I go back to if you went to production every 18 to 24 months, that was considered rather fast. A lot of the organizations I'm in anymore try to go monthly, and to them, that's their definition of continuous. Level 3 here, teams are responsible for their deployments to production. And what this is meaning, especially as opposed to level 2, is they're not a separate delivery team that is responsible for it. It's still very common that developers create some kind of package at some point, and then that package is delivered somewhere else and they do something with it. And a lot of times the teams, that's all they know is, well, something is done to it. So level 3, the team understands exactly what's happening. They're responsible for it. And then level 4 is a true continuous delivery. Full automation delivery processes are in place. Next slide, please. Are artifacts being managed by an artifact management system? You're probably going to see is directly related to the prior one, for example. And a lot of these really are interrelated. The ones that are outlined here, though, are fairly easy to see are standalone. But I'm a firm believer in the holistic nature of software delivery. So to do continuous delivery, you need managed artifacts. But you need managed artifacts for reasons other than continuous delivery. And a lot of developers will be familiar with managed artifacts using something like Nexus or Artifactory. But managing artifacts is about managing more than your direct compile or test or run dependencies. So level 1 here, dependent libraries and build artifacts are being stored in a source control system, right? A lot of us perhaps have worked at organizations where their source control, specifically things like Subversion or ClearCase, all third-party libraries are just simply shoved in there. Level 2 here, libraries and built artifacts are being managed. So you're putting those into Nexus or Artifactory, but you're not putting in your configuration, your scripts, or your test data, and that's important as well. If you're going to have automated testing, as one of the other metrics was, you have to have your test artifacts, your test data being managed as well. All the way up through here, level 4, all deployments are done using managed artifacts, and that would be DDL if you're changing a database, the actual data itself that might be needed as part of those changes, the network configuration, the firewall configuration, all of those are artifacts that need to be managed. Managed at a lot of organizations is defined as the network group knows how and is allowed to configure the firewall. That's not managed. That is a process. But managing it is not who is allowed to do something. Managing it is about under what conditions does something happen. And by managing your artifacts in an artifact management system, you can begin to automate the entire process. Next slide, please. Security. Security is another one of those things that often gets overlooked in a delivery organization. Typically, security is handled by people that are even more unfamiliar to a delivery team than are the infrastructure people or the operations folks. So with security, level 0, there's no clear approach to security. Level 1, the team has designed a security approach, and a lot of times that means that the team is aware of things like SQL injection or cross-site scripting or whatever a particular perceived vulnerability is, and they use the resources that their chosen architecture, whether that be Java or C++ or whatnot, make available to handle things like that. But it's still being done at a team level. Level 2 is there is a corporate architectural guideline available for what kind of security your application delivery teams need to be aware of, and in some cases how they need to assert that they've met the corporate requirements for those. Level 3, the delivery team understands and are responsible for everything but the actual deployments. And then level 4 is the security architect as part of the release planning. So you have that integrated team to make sure that security is being handled from start to finish of an application, that it's not an afterthought. Next slide, please. So I have really rushed through these metrics, and I'm sure I haven't got into as much of a detail as perhaps some people would want. The idea was to get out there that Eliassen takes DevOps seriously, that we take transformation seriously. You know, we understand that to know that something is expected to make something better, you have to measure it. And we have done that with our agile transformations. This is a start of doing it at something that is not purely agile process. This is specifically about DevOps. There are a lot of other things, metrics-wise, that we could put into this, but I wanted to give folks an idea of the things that are important for an adoption, the things that we will have tools that will help you measure, and then to get your feedback on areas that we're overlooking or not thinking about or that you think require more involvement. So the key takeaways are automation at every facet. Truly from a DevOps perspective, automation is the core of this, whether it be automating your builds, automating your tests, automating your deployments. Automation is key to every facet. Security needs to be taken. These should be sub-bullets. Security needs to be automated. Performance needs to be automated. Quality. And then even automation of your monitoring. And then the integration is key. We need everyone involved in software delivery to be integrated in delivery, whether that be an actual delivery team, the support teams, or the operation teams. Those are critical to a successful organizational level DevOps adoption. Next slide, please. We are working on this Emma tool, which will allow for an arbitrary number of maturity matrix to be measured and applied for organizations. We want these tools to be used to help guide your adoptions and to know where you are in your adoptions. They'll provide some team-level graphs, some organizational roll-ups, and we hope to have that available to the public sometime next year. If you guys are interested in it, please let me know, or please let whomever you might know at Eliassen know, and we'll make sure you're kept apprised of that. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons I rushed through those as quickly as I did is I wanted to have a lot of time for any questions, answers, and discussions around anything we've been talking about. I much prefer interactive presentations to kind of these static presentations. So with that, let's open it up to anyone with any questions.
Thanks, Tim. I do have a couple of questions here. As Tim suggests, hopefully next year this tool will be available for everybody to use, and if you stay involved, and obviously everybody a part of this webinar will be filled in on those details. But just to address a couple of questions here, and then we'll wrap it up to buy everybody back some time. Tim, the first question I have is, are ATD, BDD included in an automated build?
Typically, in an automated build, a lot of this gets down to semantical arguments. Anymore, one of the things you're seeing with tools in the DevOps space, regardless of whether that be Jenkins or Bamboo or Travis or whatever the CI product is they're trying to come up with these build pipelines that are from the time code changes to the time software is deployed somewhere. And if we define that as a build, then yes, ATDD or BDD, and for those that might not be familiar, that would be acceptance test-driven development and behavioral-driven development. Those tests need to be part of that. Probably some of the most common tools in that space would be the Ruby Cucumber. There are others, of course. And yes, they should be part of it. That's one of the things I help clients understand is when it comes to automating your acceptance tests or your behavior tests around your requirements or the expected functionality of the application, that's really important. And those can be automated. And not only can they be automated, they should be automated at a couple of different levels. So what I mean by that is Ruby and Cucumber is a great tool for doing Gherkin-style ATDD and BDD tests, but it's often dismissed because, oh, well, those are just browser-based tests. No, actually, they're not. Browser-based testing is an add-on to those. You should be doing, especially things like BDD, behavior-driven development, against your APIs. One of the things we're seeing more and more is microservices, and microservices being deployed on environments like Docker. So, you have IaaS and things like that. So, especially if you're in organizations that's adopting microservices and you're automatically deploying those to Docker containers, you need BDD tests against those to assert that they are functioning in the way you expect them to be functioning as part of your build cycle. So yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Tim. Another question. How is DevOps different than Agile software development methodology like XP and Scrum?
So XP, Scrum, Kanban, things like that are processes. They are a process for doing software development. A lot of what we see in the DevOps world originated out of things like XP. XP, things like testing were core and are core to that process of software development. But running tests takes time. Developers don't have the time to do that, so ways were needed to automate it. So especially things like XP led to a lot of the desire to automate, which is what led to things like Cruise Control and Anthill Pro, or Anthill for those old enough in the industry to remember those things. So XP, Kanban, Scrum are processes for doing Agile software delivery. DevOps is an Agile practice, but we're actually seeing more and more organizations that don't want anything to do with Agile want and need DevOps. So you can implement DevOps in a waterfall organization. DevOps is a desirable way of running a software delivery organization regardless of the process in place used for writing that software. So that's what differentiates it.
Great. We have time for one more question. If anybody has a question and they'd like to pop it into the questions box, we'll go ahead and take that right now. All right, Tim, I have one more for you. XP engineer practices for Agile software development, and you are providing the process to accomplish those practices.
I'm sorry,
does that make
sense?
It says, are not okay, so Are XP engineer practices for Agile software development providing the process to, are you providing the process to accomplish those practices?
The processes that I'm talking about when it comes to measuring a DevOps adoption can definitely be used as the process to accomplish a lot of the things in XP or in Scrum or in lowercase a Agile software development. A core tenet of lowercase a Agile software development is testing, for example. And it's not uncommon that you will have QA people who will write manual test cases, and that in theory can be considered an Agile software practice. But it's not a DevOps practice. To be a DevOps practice, that needs to be automated. So adopting DevOps can allow you to realize your Agile XP practices, but they're loosely coupled. They're not particularly tightly coupled.
Great. Well, at this time we have a couple more questions, but we'll be following up with those folks individually. We want to buy back some time for everyone and let everybody enjoy their lunches and everything else. Tim, thank you so much for a great presentation. Everybody, thanks for joining us today. We will be following up tomorrow with the recording of this webinar as well as the slides. And please stay tuned for more details on Emma and the release of that. Again, thank you everybody and have a great day.